is very relevant to what you are discussing all this week also. But all the same, when I mentioned respect, I'm sure some of you thought about, at least some of you thought about the courtesy, the courteous way in which we handle each other and so on, the manifestation of respect in all aspects of our life, at home, in schools, in colleges, in workplaces, and public spaces also. The respect and the courtesy. In fact, we sort of tend to overdo this in India, at least in the past. I would like to actually mention one small anecdote. It is not first hand, it is second hand, but someone very respectful told me this. Actually, a professor from IIT Kanpur mentioned this to me and other people about how we overdo this respect part. Even at home, we don't speak in front of elders. We don't speak in front of our husband sometimes. Apparently, sort of a party, a get-together was organized in the US, in one of the universities, where, for the graduate students in one group. The graduate students, the PhD students are all assembled in the house of the advisor. Some of them were married. Some of them were Indian students. One Indian student was married. And it said that his wife was there with her head covered with her sari pallu. And she was not willing to talk because she said, I don't speak in front of my husband. That is how we sometimes overdo this manifestation of respect used to in India. But now, everywhere, this respect is under threat, jeopardy, everywhere. But even in schools in India, if you go to not only government schools, but even other private schools, sometimes the children don't know how to respect because they are brought up in a family with just one or two children. And so the parents have just not taught them respect, or taught them how to accept criticisms and so on and so forth. Again, I would like to present an anecdote which is firsthand. Something which happened in UK. One of my colleagues from Imperial College, he was in his early 40s, and he decided that he wants to spend the rest of his life teaching science in schools of UK in and around London. And so he left his job at Imperial and went there, and he came back within 2 months. And he said, well, I couldn't handle it there. The type of behavior that the children have, the lack of respect, the type of language that they speak, and so on. That is how it is happening all over the world nowadays. So that courtesy is going out of phase, actually, out of fashion. And it's because it's all just behaviorism. We've not really taught people what it is to respect others. It's just behavior. When an elder comes, you have to stand up. When an elder comes, you should not speak in their presence. Those sort of behaviorism without really giving the convictions. And no wonder it is on the decline. But anyway, my topic is not that. What exactly is respect? I just Googled, and there are these few definitions, let us say, of respect. Respect is treating everyone and everything with care, giving due regards to the feelings, wishes, and rights of others, admiration towards someone. So that is respect, treating everyone and everything with care, giving due regards to the feelings,
Sir,
wishes.
sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. Slide
Yes,
not moving, sir, please.
yes, I have not moved the slide. Can you see the movement? Yes. Okay, so the objects of our respect is actually everyone and everything around us. All human beings, irrespective of who they are, what their background is, what their nationality is, what region they come from. Not only every human beings, but every living beings. Not only every living being, but the whole earth. Not only the earth, the entire cosmos. All of them are objects of our respect. So that is what I'm going to really talk about. Respect for nature. Respect for the environment.
Are you changing the slides, Father?
Yes, I just changed now. Can
No,
you see?
it is not changed.
I am in the third slide.
No, we are still in the first slide. That's
What
why.
is it showing? What is there on the first on the slide?
The title, faculty respect
Oh,
to the other.
no, I have been advancing quite a bit. Shall I try again?
And now it's changed. It's gone back to the first one.
Okay, now has it moved?
No,
Oh, has it moved?
no. And now it moved. It's gone to respect, and
Yes.
that's the second slide.
Okay, I
Now,
just spoke about that already, and
yeah.
I'll move to the next one. Can you,
Next one is
did it move?
now it's moved. How is our respect for the environment?
Okay, yes. I think this group at least will say that our respect for the environment is very good. I guess so, because most of you are environmental scientists or teachers of environmental science. You're probably doing research on how to preserve the environment, even spending a lot of money on that particular topic. Even this FDP, we are spending so much money to preserve the environment, to learn how to treat the environment, and so on and so forth, share ideas. So you'll say our respect for environment is very high. I don't know if I'm right. You will say, but I will contradict what you said. I don't know if the slide moved now. Uh,
No,
oh,
we're still in how is our respect for the environment. Third slide.
third slide is there a first bullet point or second bullet point?
It has all 4 bullet points.
Okay, one major bullet okay. Can you see the slide now?
Which one? Third or fourth?
This what slide are you seeing now?
How is our respect for the environment?
You see the whole slide?
Yeah, we see the whole
Okay,
slide.
okay, because I think it is the animation that is not working.
Okay.
When I try to put
No,
it in
because if you had gone to the show, no slide show,
slideshow is what's not working.
yeah,
Slide,
that's not working.
uh,
Okay.
so I'll just. Are you able to?
Try once again slideshow whether it comes.
Okay, I'm in slideshow now.
Yeah, but it's not changing to slideshow.
Oh, it is not changing to slideshow at all.
Yeah, we're still in that with the other editable matter on.
Oh, I have been working with slideshow all along these days. I mean, all these talks so far. I don't know how to go to. Shall I close and open and see if it works? I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try. Now I am in slideshow mode. Are you able to see slideshow or just the slide in the edit mode?
We're not able to see anything.
Better?
It's not slideshow. It's in the
Yes.
already edit.
Now?
Now also it's in the same thing.
Oh, I
It's okay. You
am.
can continue. We can read it in between. You just presume that there's no slideshow.
Okay, okay. Now it is the slide which says, how is our respect for the environment?
Yeah. So we can read all the 4 points.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, there won't be too many animations, but slideshow will show it fully. Anyway, so I'm actually in this point. Can you see my cursor moving? My
Yeah,
cursor?
yeah.
Okay, I am on that point. Even though you may think that this group's level of respect for the environment is very high, I would like to differ on that point, and I would like to say that at best, you're all trying to treat symptoms of the harm that disrespect to nature has caused it. And also, in fact, you're not healing the symptoms either, but you're making things worse. I'm really glad that this is done in an online forum instead of face to face, because many of you might probably wanted to want to throw some missiles at me at this point for saying what I did just say. But at the end of this talk, you give it an open hearing. And at the end of the talk, if you disagree with what I just said, you are entitled to that. And you can even give me that as a feedback, because we all are entitled to deduce for ourselves whether what someone is saying is right or not. But listen me out when I say that what you all are doing is at best treating symptoms of the harm that disrespect to nature has caused to nature. And in doing that, you're not actually healing it, you're making things worse. Quite audacious to say it to this group, but please listen me out, and then you judge whether it is true or not. And in fact, some of the multiple choice questions that I give you at the end for evaluation, I will leave it all open-ended for you to decide for yourself what it is. Okay, so I think, and this is not only my view, but view of many people, that looking at your role, looking at our role as scientists, especially environmental scientists, especially, but all scientists and all engineers and all technologists, we are actually being used by the mighty and the wealthy, by the economic and political powers of the world. We are playing into their hands, playing to their tunes, either knowingly or unknowingly. And even though there's been enormous development over the past 200 years, 2 centuries, it has not been an integral development. That is how we are disrespecting the environment. That's going to be the topic of what I'm going to speak to you about environment. Even this is very much a human value that I'm going to talk about, not science, but human value. So 2 centuries, I've advanced to the next slide. The slide should say 2 centuries of enormous change. Are you on that slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. 2 centuries of enormous change, starting from the steam engines, the railways, the telegraphs, electricities, all the way to modern medicine, knowledge of DNA, nuclear energy, and so on. And all of this is tremendous power, especially for those who have this knowledge, but even more for those who have the economic resources to use them. Sometimes nowadays, with all the IP and rights and patents and all, it is both of them are the same. Economic resources and the knowledge is with the same person. And this gives us impressive dominance over the whole of humanity and the entire world. But then, if you look at how it has been over the past 200 years, there is nothing at all to reassure us that this power, this tremendous power, is going to be used for our good. It's going to be used in the proper way. Not only by totalitarian regimes, but even by the so-called democracies. The way, I don't even have to name any country. We know very well, even the democracies really are not using this power for the common good, for the good of everyone. Rather, it is really for the high and the mighty, the powerful and the economically sound. And it's very risky when you think about it as to whose hands this power will end up with in the future. Quite risky. And that is why Mahatma Gandhi, in a very beautiful but thin book, small book that has been written, Hind Swaraj, he says that all machine is evil. All machine is evil. That's how it has been. 200 years of enormous change, but used for destruction. Destruction, widespread. We may not have been the fruit of the destruction, but widespread destruction has taken place. Now, if you look at all those destructions, environmental impact of the past 2 centuries, the problem in a nutshell is something that is called rapidification. By the way, my major source is a book written by the head of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis. That's the major source, but not the only source. There are other sources also. And there, the problem is presented as rapidification. Rapidification, too rapid a change. Change and evolution are part of complex systems. And development is also evolution. It's also part of evolution, starting from the evolution of life forms in the sea, in the land, and the air, and so on. This is also all the developments that we are talking of are evolution, scientific developments, technological revolutions. But then this evolution is too rapid compared to the slow pace of biological natural evolution. That's why when Gandhi says that all machines are evil, a question is put to him in that book. And someone says, if that is the case, even the hand wheel that you are using is a evil. Says, well, but the hand wheel is spun by the human hand. But a mechanized wheel is the problem. The speed, the rapidification, the mechanized wheel is the problem, as Gandhiji argues. And further, this rapid growth that we are undertaking is not all for common good. Common good means the good of the whole universe. It is not for the good of the whole universe, whereas natural evolution is for the good of the whole universe. And so, this rapid pace has the risk of destroying nature and the one who is exploiting it, obviously, because he is also part of the nature. Now, moving on, what are the specific problems? We know, I move to the next slide, pollution of land, water, and air. In fact, if I put it in the animation mode, in the slideshow mode, it will be really nice to see these pictures, but we'll have to do without it, I guess. Pollution caused by hundreds of millions of tons of residue annually. Dangerous waste, non-biodegradable waste, highly toxic and radioactive, and the earth begins to look like an immense pile of filth. The two photos that I have shown here are actually of the same river in Chennai, the Kuam River. Believe it or not, when I was growing up, I thought that Kuam was man-made canal to send out sewage. That's what I thought, because that's how it looks. It's full of sewage. But actually, it is a natural river. It's one of the three rivers that are flowing in this area, Kuam. And the photo on the left, the black and white photo, is as it was around the time of independence, 1947, where boats were plying in that river, the Kuam River. Whereas the picture on the right is today full of filth, particularly plastic bottles. If you go in front of the central station where people come into Chennai, they'll come and land in the central station. The Kuam River is completely fully covered with plastic bottles on top of it. That is how we have made this land. Not only land, water and air are also polluted. And that leads to various health hazards. Perhaps if you measure the level of toxins in the air or in the water or in the land at a particular time, it might be below toxic levels. It might be below toxic levels. But the bioaccumulation in the organism over a period of time, that causes great harm. And the atmospheric pollutants produce broad spectrum of diseases, something that were not there even like say 15 years ago. Broad spectrum of health hazards and diseases as a result of that. Moving on, the problem is we are not as conscientious as ecosystem is. We have this throwaway culture. We quickly reduce everything to rubbish. We don't recycle paper. Food is just discarded just because we don't like the taste of food. And I put this quote here. I hope you're able to read it. Food thrown out is food stolen from the table of the poor. Food thrown out is food stolen from those who do not have food. It was actually not your food in the first place. It was their food. So you took it from their table and then you said, I don't like it, and you threw it out. A related note, I would like to say, if someone who does not have food is starving for a few days, and he goes to a rich man's house and steals some food, actually he's not stealing. He's taking what belongs to him. That food was actually his. The rich man had improperly taken that food and kept it with him. He was the one who had appropriated that food. It's not the poor man who had stolen. It was the rich man who had actually stolen from the poor. Unless the poor man steals from another poor man, he is not at all guilty of stealing. In that vein, food thrown out is food stolen from the table of the poor. This throwaway culture. In contrast, nature does not really throw away anything. Everything is recycled. Everything is recycled. Just these points. The plants synthesize nutrients to feed herbivores. Herbivores feed on the plants. And the carnivores feed on the herbivores. And these in turn produce significant amount of organic waste to generate a new plant. And there's a cycle established beautifully. Plants to herbivores to carnivores back to plants. Nothing is wasted. Everything is recycled. We, human beings, have not managed to adopt a circular mode of production like nature does, limiting our use of non-renewable resources and maximizing the use of non-renewable, efficiency of use of non-renewable resources. We have not done that. We are discarding too much, throwaway culture, and that is a major problem. Now, climate change. Climate is a common good. It's something which is common to everyone. And it's a complex system. Complex system, sometimes people model a system, a small system, maybe a reactor. I'm a chemical engineer, as Dr. Lima said. And I actually have a mathematical modeling model background. So we used to model a reactor, for example, an emulsion polymerization reactor. And we see that it is a complex system because there are so many things going on, so many different phenomena, physical phenomena, chemical phenomena, and transportation, all of these things, exchanges, everything is going on. And when you try to link all of them and create a mathematical model, the system is highly nonlinear. And there are so many different nonlinear phenomena like multiplicity and irreversibility and so on and so forth. A small reactor, we say, is so complex. Just think about the whole universe. The universe is enormously complex a system, and that we have recklessly tweaked here and there, tweeted here and there, and caused the climate change. And this actually has global grave implications. Many poor people have their livelihood completely affected because they are dependent upon agriculture, fishing, and forestry, and grazing, and so on and so forth. And they're all affected. They're all affected by our reckless use of science and technology for our own good. Now, you can argue that climate change is not only because of human involvement, but the tweaking by human beings, because surely there are so many scientific causes that could be behind climate change and global warming. I have in fact listed some of them here: volcanic activity, variations in the Earth's orbit and axis, solar cycle. All of these also could be the reason why there is this climate change and global warming. But then there's no denying the fact that the most important of all that is the greenhouse gases. And those are emitted, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxides. These are emitted by human activity. So we are very much culpable for this climate change, even though there could be other causes. The major cause, greenhouse gases, is because of our activity. And you know what happens because of that? Hampers the escape of heat produced on the Earth's surface. And so there is the warming because of the excessive use of fossil fuels. And that goes on to affect the carbon cycle and affects the drinking water, energy, agriculture, everything. And the planet's biodiversity is seriously affected. Global warming. Now I'm on a slide which says global warming, and there are some two photographs also. It has various effects on the planet. Firstly, there is the constant rise in sea level, extreme weather conditions like cloud bursts. Often nowadays we have cloud bursts in major cities, coastal cities. This is actually a photo from Chennai in the year 2015. There was a cloud burst actually on here, enormous amount of rainfall on a single day, and as a result, the city was actually plunged. In fact, NASA was predicting that the rains would be continuing for one more day, and actually, thankfully, it didn't happen. If it had happened, if NASA's predictions had been correct on that day, and if it had rained for one more day in Chennai, the whole city would have been in very, very serious condition. Why not even destroyed? That is how close we went to destruction in 2015. Thankfully, there was some intervention and the rain stopped. Against prediction, the rain stopped. But then this is becoming a very common phenomena, the cloud bursts and the flooding of cities. It's becoming a very common phenomena. Mumbai and Chennai and so on. And not only that, the melting of the ice, the frozen ice melting, releasing the methane gases that are contained, trapped inside them. And not only that, the frozen organic materials start to decompose and they go on and emit more carbon dioxide and increase the global warming, aggravate the problem further. The loss of tropical forests, there's a beautiful picture about the tropical forests. Without all that, what is life? The greenery and the rains and the lush environment and the various types of species, animals, birds, reptiles, insects, worms. Without them, what is life? But all of that are being destroyed, because of a narrow approach to life. Where is our respect for environment? And our little bit, where is it really treating the big problem? It's not. The rise in sea level, actually, already we've seen major cities. Most of those big cities of the world are along the coast. And thereby, there's a big problem if the sea level continues to rise, as the photo also shows. So there's a graying of Earth as a result of all this global warming. Water is becoming a big problem. I'm on a slide which says water, it's 14th slide. It's becoming a big problem. Underground water is being polluted, for example, because of farming. Farming because we are using artificial fertilizers. And the artificial fertilizers go and pollute the groundwater. And various industrial effluents also pollute the groundwater. Water becomes just undrinkable. Some years ago, say some 15, 20 years ago, we could drink water even from a spring. If there is a little spring that is flowing on the road, you can easily descend. I mean, as you're driving through some forest area or something, if you see a small stream, you can easily get down from your vehicle, go and drink that water. But you cannot do that now. Cannot do that. Let alone that stream, even our tap waters, we are not able to drink. I remember when I started working at Imperial College, the first day, I went and asked one of my colleagues, where is the water faucet? I said, where is the drinking water faucet? And that person said, what, do we have to even give you drinking water? I was wondering, what else do you have to give me? If not drinking water, you don't have to give me food. Food I can buy. But drinking water, why should I buy drinking water? I found that a very strange culture. I was coming from the US. In the US, all the universities, they have probably centralized water treatment plants. So there were faucets of water, drinking water, and I was used to that. And of course, in India, we were drinking water from any taps. And there, I could not find a drinking water tap. And the faculty member actually asked me, do we have to provide drinking water to you for free? Then I was really wondering, why not? What else do you have to provide me for free? I can buy food, but I don't have to buy drinking water. That's a very basic necessity for any human being, not only me, anyone. You should be able to get water for free. How can someone have to buy water? But now after I came back from India, in fact, so it was some 15 years ago, I came back to India. I used to drink water from the bus stands whenever I'm traveling. I used to fill the water from the bus taps, and within a few months, I had typhoid. That has become the state of the world. You're not able to drink water, and so we need purifiers. And water has become a commodity. We have to pay money to buy water. It's all actually market that has driven to it. And then the day is not very far away when air will become a commodity, when we'll have to buy air. In fact, many people, vested interests, are trying that. I know one person here in the place where I am right now. He was coming and telling me the situation is getting very bad with the air. So there is actually an instrument, oxygen supply, which you can carry along with you, like you're carrying your water bottle. You can carry your oxygen supply. So why don't you buy one of that and keep? Actually, still there is no need for us to do something like that. Still there is no need for us to carry oxygen with us. But then the markets are trying to create that need right now. This man's vested interest is to make someone with a high visibility in the society to carry something like that, so that that becomes an easy advertisement for him, easy marketing. And then he will go around and say, see, this particular person is carrying oxygen supply with him, because that is the need of the hour. So you also have to buy. And very soon, everyone will become accustomed to carrying oxygen supply, just as we have become accustomed to carrying water, to buying water. This is the vested interest, market force. They will create such a situation as they have created for water. Even though if they may not be a need actually for us to carry oxygen cylinder, even though the air has not become that polluted, market forces are already buying. How very serious a situation this is. Breakdown of human value completely. No respect for fellow human beings, no respect for Mother Earth, only to make money. Now, this very water treatment plants that they have installed everywhere has actually gone on to make the water even more polluted. Because when we treat water using ion exchange columns and so on and so forth, you know very well, we create even more wastewater than what we had to start with. We create more wastewater. The coming water is probably not as bad as the water that we send out as refuse. And that is how now completely water has become undrinkable. We have to really buy water. Similar thing will be done when we buy oxygen cylinders. That oxygen cylinder itself will make the situation even worse for the environment. That is how our interventions are on earth. When we are trying to treat a symptom through our intervention, that invariably leads to even worsening the symptom than solving the problem. I told you in the beginning, we are trying to treat a symptom caused by the harm that we have shown to environment, but that treatment is not really healing the problem, it is making it worse. That's what even the water treatment plants have done. That's what even the air treatment plants would do if at all we get to that situation. So it's really a dire situation. Moving on, transportation. It leaves much to be desired. These are two photos of the traffic jam in cities. If you look at that photo on the right, actually, I hope you're able to see. Maybe I will zoom it up a little bit. There is one public transport, one bus, this red color bus, and one or two autos. The rest are all private cars, and then there are a few trucks and so on and so forth. It is enormous injustice, I would say. I say it's enormous injustice because it is the poor who are suffering because of this. The few rich want to travel in comfort in their air-conditioned cars. They're not willing to take the public transportation. And as a result, instead of, let's say, 4 or 5 buses flying on the road, we have 100 cars on the road. No wonder there will be a traffic jam. No wonder there will be a traffic jam. It's because of the rich. Now, the rich are not affected because of that. They are sitting inside their air-conditioned cars. But the poor sitting in those sweltering buses, crowded buses, sweating, delayed, not being able to go to office. The rich probably have a 8-hour or 10-hour work schedule. They can come in flexibly and go out. But the poor may not have that flexibility. They have to come in at the right time. They are anxiety, and as a result, they are. If the public is better, perhaps we can ask the rich people to use it. But public transportation is really in a pitiable condition, isn't it?
Father,
This
the
is, of course,
voice
not
is
your
breaking.
fault entirely, but yes. Hello,
Your voice is breaking. We're getting.
can you hear now?
Yeah,
Can you hear
now it's
now?
better. It's better. We can hear, but
Okay, I'll sit close. Okay. Uh, I'm sitting very close to the laptop. Feeble.
the voice is not audible.
Hello.
Now okay. But can you speak a line or so that we can find out whether it is audible?
Uh, okay. Okay. I'm actually on a slide which says transportation. Are you able to see?
Yeah, we
And
are
it
able to
says
see the slide.
the,
We saw the
uh,
Zoom and all, but in between there was a noise. Okay, continue. We'll see.
okay. 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 So, even though it is something to do with policy, it is not your fault, but you're not completely condoned. You know why? The condition of the buses, one wonder, it makes one wonder who taught them engineering. Who taught them engineering? There's no thought that has gone into building these, even the chassis, let alone the engine, just the chassis itself. The windows, either they are jammed shut or jammed open. They are jammed shut so that in the hot climate you cannot open it, or they are jammed open so that in the rainy season you cannot shut it. And then when it rains, the whole all the seats are wet, so no one is sitting on the seats even though the bus is crowded. All the seats are empty but the bus is crowded. Pitiable. One wonders who built those chases. It's the engineers, isn't it? And aren't we culpable for that? How can we build such buses using the money and wasting it? Why don't we do a conscientious job at that? That is one thing. So even if the buses are in good condition, I'm sure we will not be able to convince the rich people to abandon their cars. I'm sure many of you fall under that, to abandon their cars and take public transport, because we are used to door-to-door service. Would like to get on into our cars or maybe two-wheelers at our destination. No getting down at the bus stop or the railway station and walking to our workplace, our homes. All those things are too much. We put all of those problems and woodlands entail loss of species, obviously. If you destroy forests, Congo Basin or the tropical rainforest are destroyed, as it were, for various industrial purposes. And that, for example, leads to the loss of forests. And it's a gray forest that we have on the right side here, no greenery. And water is probably very polluted already. And this pollution is for land, ocean, and air. The coral reef, they say that its enormous color. I mean, this picture, I'm sure it's not at all doing any justice to that. The color of the coral reef, underwater coral reef in the tropical and subtropical seas. Many of them are already barren and in a state of decline, both because of the pollutants that we left into the sea, and also because of the rise in the ocean temperature. The coral reefs and the beauty and the color of the fish and the planktons, they're all lost. They're all lost. Now, talking about even evolution is also very careful not to produce any species which are redundant, any species which is not necessary for the survival of Earth. Even if you take the evolution paradigm, that everything evolved from one to the other, we can be very certain that evolution did not produce any species that is redundant, that can be done away with, and the rest of the humanity, rest of the ecosystem survives. It's not possible, because all species are necessary for the survival of the whole ecosystem. So when we destroy some species, really we are in the process of losing something very important. Perhaps not today, but in the years to come. Some food or some medicine for cure, these are all being destroyed when these species are being destroyed. Secondly, we should not just look at any species as just there as a potential resource. Every species should have a value in itself. A human being should respect that value. Even an algae, even a fungi, every plant species has a value in itself. We have no right to say this is not of any use, so I can destroy it. No right. But as I say, no species, I'm sure, is there which has no value. We may not know what its value is, but everything is definitely necessary, because no redundancy in the cosmos. And even if there is redundancy, we have to respect the value of each species, not just because they are going to be useful, but because we want them to survive as long as the cosmos survives. Even now, our children will never be able to see many of the species that we as children saw. We may be probably upset and disturbed by the extinction of mammals and birds because they are more visible. For example, the sparrows. Sparrows did create sort of a hue and cry when they were not seen. But it is not only the visible mammals and birds, but even the fungi, algae, worms, reptiles, all of them are required. None of them should be disturbed if you do not want to disturb the equilibrium of the place. And the impact on the loss of the species is a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. There are many birds, I'm sure you know, many birds, many insects also, which are useful for farmers in the fields. But the agricultural fertilizers, agrotoxins that we are using destroy these species. And as a result, the help that they were rendering, the birds and the insects which are lost, is now not there for the farmers. And then we say, scientists say, environmentalists say, we will help you to replace that loss with some other human intervention. So we produce something which actually makes things worse. It doesn't improve. We are trying to substitute an irreplaceable and irretrievable feature with something artificially created. And this is a vicious cycle. It will create even more problem. Every intervention that we make in nature will have consequence. Some of them will be good, but most of them will not be. And the rapid pace in which we make these interventions do not allow nature a chance to heal itself. We do not allow time for the nature to heal itself, and thereby we make everything very bad. Now, sometimes, for example, we destroy forests and plant trees, monocultures. Even I was taking pride that I have planted 60 mango plants in my church backyard. Hardly any replacement for the destruction that we human beings have caused. Virgin forests cannot be replaced by monoculture plantations. Even if I plant 1,000 trees, I'm sure it will not replace the virgin forest that we have destroyed, because these monocultures, for one, may not be able to sustain the biodiversity that the virgin forest, the tropical forest, the Amazons were able to do. And an equally important problem is the suffering that we have inflicted upon fellow human beings. I already mentioned that in the context of the transportation, but this again is a picture of a slum right next to this water source. Probably this is Chennai, the Kuam River, very dirty. How will they live there? I was once in a conference. It was organized in Bombay jointly by the American Institute of Chemical Engineers and the Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers. I think it was in Hyatt, in Grand Hyatt in Bombay. It was many years ago. I don't remember exactly. And the right next to that Grand Hyatt where the conference was held was a sprawling slum in Bombay. I'm sorry to say this, but even the toilets in the rooms in the Grand Hyatt were spick and span, and one could even just live there, even eat our food there. But then the slums, in the houses in the slums, they will not even be able to sit and eat there. That is how the situation is. How can we cause this situation to human beings, fellow human beings? And it's not only the emissions, but also the chaos, the noise, lack of privacy, congestion, lack of green space. And then there are these mighty people who create ecological neighborhoods, and that is not open to the so-called disposables of the society. They are kept as outsiders to ensure artificial tranquility for themselves. How absurd can that be? Loss of identity as a result. Human beings have lost dignity. Many of the human beings, their dignity is denied. And the migrants, increasing number of migrants, the plight of the migrants is really very sad, pathetic. What happens is they leave their place with probably their properties and so on and so forth, and their livelihood, and go somewhere. And when these migrants from one place to the other within the country, for example, Biharis migrating to Chennai, to give an example, for example, they don't have the legal protection that migrants from one country to the other have. They are really migrants, but they don't have that legal protection. How very sad and pathetic. Really, we owe a social debt to the poor of this land. And last but not the least, actually among the woes, is the digital revolution. Digital revolution, where we've replaced true wisdom with an information overload. Today's digital world makes it very difficult for someone to turn to the wise men of the past. They go unheard these days among the noise and the distractions that the media offers today. True wisdom cannot be attained by accumulation of data. Accumulation of data will only lead to confusion and a sort of mental pollution. True wisdom is the fruit of self-examination in silence, quiet, dialogue, meaningful dialogue, and encounter between the people. Digital media does not enable dialogue. In fact, the physical gestures are very important for dialogue. The facial expressions, the joys and the sorrows that are expressed in the face, in our touches, the moments of silence between the exposures, between the exchanges, the body languages, the smells, the trembling of hands, the blushes, and the perspirations. These are all completely lost. For example, in WhatsApp, we have all these, I don't know what they're called, these faces and so on, emojis, I think. They are trying to capture all of these emotions. How pathetic. What an impoverishment. If you want to blush, you have to send an emoji to say that you are blush. If you are showing trembling of hands, you have to send an emoji. Completely, we are shielded from direct contact, and hence there's this deep dissatisfaction with interpersonal relationships, and the sense of isolation. Sense of isolation is there in the world today. And the onslaught on cultures, in fact, more even than the disappearance of species, disappearance of different types of species, disappearance of cultures is very, very serious. Very serious. Here is a picture of the people from the Narmada Valley who are displaced because of the project that is done there. They have their own way of living and their own way of interacting and making their life meaningful. How are we entitled to tell them that this is not the way they are supposed to live? They are supposed to follow a particular culture, which is not even our culture in the first place, a culture which came from the mighty superpower. Why should they do that? Even if we, the cities, want to do that, why should we force these people to have to do that? This picture here on the bottom is a petty shop, which are all completely losing out. Of course, the supermarkets are also losing out nowadays to the Amazons and so on, the online marts and whatnot. But this petty shop, can you see? I don't know, these little bottles, cool drink bottles. Nowadays, all of that is gone. We have only plastic bottles everywhere, and they only cause harm, no good whatsoever. The drink in them is a harm, firstly, and the bottle also is a harm. This year, on the top right, is a picture of the Salem-Chennai highway type of a project, the 8-way highway, destroying all forests and the livelihood of the people that are living there. And their culture, fishermen losing their culture. Who are we to say that the fishermen should not be fishing the way they are doing? They have to abandon their fishing and they have to come to the cities and go and work in industries. Who are we to say that? And will they be able to compete with the people who had grown up in the cities and grow up in life? Will they be on par with those people? It's a grave danger to cause cultures to disappear, even more grave than the loss of species or some species. And this all affects not only individuals, but also regions, countries as a whole. Some people, multinationals, come and pollute countries, even our own country, much more than they would ever dare to do their own home country, their own home country. And what do? They throw a few jobs and do some acts of philanthropy through so-called corporate social responsibility. These are nothing but bones thrown to the dogs. Nothing more than that. I live now in a place which was once a dense forest. Now there are two big sipcots in this area, and the forests are all actually what we have here is probably only 25% of what was there about 25 years ago. And what they did, they promised saying that all you people will get so many jobs in the companies that are coming here, and you'll have lots of money, and you'll be able to live happily, leave your farming and so on and so forth. But that is just like bones thrown to dogs. A few people only have gotten jobs. We see the reality. And they do give some money here and there. When a temple is organizing a festival or a church is organizing a festival, they will give some 5,000 each company. And that is under the corporate social responsibility, and everything is done and done with. That is how they exploit regions and countries. And eventually, when they have exploited the region, they will leave everything and go. And what is left for that place is some open pits, riven hills, polluted rivers, and some meaningless social works. Nothing more than that. No employment also, and the place is made unlivable. Unlivable. Surely, Sister Earth is pleading that we take a different course. Another course, never have we so mistreated our common home as we have done in the past 200 years. Never. And we still lack the culture needed to confront the crisis. A few environmental scientists working on how to treat land, water, and air wastes is not going to solve the problem. We need a different culture, and we still lack that. Our leadership that leads towards that is also still lacking. But Sister Earth is pleading with us to take a different course. So, why is the present approach inadequate? The next few slides, I will talk about why the present approaches are inadequate. So far, I talked about what are the impacts. Next few slides will be why the present approach is not going to solve the problem. And then I will talk about potential more sustainable approaches, let us say. So, present approaches and their inadequacy. Firstly, what we have today is a false ecology uh, being spread by vested interests. A frank look at the common earth, our home, shows that it is falling apart. That's what I showed in all the past slides. The common home is falling apart. The present world system is unsustainable from a number of points of view. I showed all of them, most of them in the previous slides. From a number of points of views, and what has happened is we are about all of human activity, happiness, happiness, happiness. That is the goal. We work for happiness. If anyone is not happy, that's the truth. And superficial ecology to create complex and even race. Nothing is serious, perfect, fine. The planet will continue as it is. It will itself on its own. Rapid scaling, even before it through other modifications. So the plant will not heal itself on its own. We need to make change the lifestyle. But then there are these two extreme
I think there's some connectivity problem.
Hello?
There's some connectivity problem, I think. Now the slide also.
Connectivity problem.
Yeah, it's come back. Now it's better.
Yours, your speech is also being cut. I can't hear properly.
No, now I muted it. Now it's okay because I'm using only the university line. So I think that is fine. Now you can speak. We'll see what happens.
Are you able to hear? Are you able to hear?
Yeah, I'm able to hear. We are able to hear.
Can you hear?
Pardon?
Okay, shall I proceed?
Yeah, you proceed. You kindly proceed.
Okay. I have about 50 minutes more, is it, ma'am? Do I have another 15 minutes or so? Hello?
Yeah, you can. You want 15 minutes more.
Oh. No,
Hello.
50, no? It's at 1:30, no? Up to 1:30,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's up to 1:30. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, okay. Now, I was talking about the inadequacy of the present approaches. Um, the solely technological approach to solve the ecological problem, the environmental problem, the problem with nature, that is itself a problem. How can you solve this whole problem purely with technology? Of relations, incapable. I talked about the modeling of a small polymerization reactor, emulsion polymerization reactor. So many factors are there that we are not able to account for all of them well to capture the complex dynamics that are there in these reactors. That being the case, how can we capture the complexity of the whole environmental system with all its ramifications and solve the problem purely with technology? That is not going to work out. So thinking that technology is the only way, is the sole way to solve this problem, it's itself a problem. Technology, at best, it provides some urgent and partial technical remedies, which, as I've been arguing, is inadequate. Inadequate, and in fact, it creates more problem through these remedies. And your concern is only on the effects shown on soil, water, and air. I saw the topics. I'm sorry. I'm really glad that I'm not face to face, because I may not be able to say some of these things face to face, because you're all spending so much time and your intelligence and your energy in working on various techniques to treat waste in soil, water, and air. But that is not enough. Very few careful studies on the impact on biodiversity. What are the impacts and the remedies that you suggest to treat the pollution of soil, water, and air are itself causing more damage than good, because technology alone is not a solution. Not a solution. Little attention is paid, for example, to study the reproductive systems of species which are endangered, uh, species which we exploit for our commercial processes. We don't study the reproductive pattern, so that in the eventuality of they sort of becoming extinct, we allowing them to come back. We don't do anything to create that scenario. And what we need is a distinct way of looking at things, way of thinking, policies, educational program, very important, a lifestyle change, a lifestyle, which means some spirituality change, to combat the solely technological paradigm. Solely technological paradigm should be changed, should be changed. And humans cannot be separated from nature. So development should go hand in hand with protection of environment. What we have done is we've allowed development, as it were, as if it is separate, and then brought in environmental methods. Environmental methods are relatively new. I remember when I was applying for PhD studies abroad, it was around the early 1990s, 1990s, and so on. During that time, the environmental studies were gaining importance, and there was so much funding for environmental studies than for core studies, core research. I used to think, well, I want to only do core research. I want to research in chemical reaction engineering, which Dr. Lima taught me, or I want to research in modeling and so on, not in environmental sciences. That's how environment was thought of as an afterthought, not the core most important thing. That sort of separation of core from environmental studies itself is a big wrong. Environmental studies and core developmental activities have to go hand in hand, not in isolation. And not only that, nature and the society in which the nature we live in, they also have to be accounted for together. Nature not something separate from ourselves or a mere setting in which we live. We are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction with it. So, relation between the environment and nature and society, all aspects have to be accounted for. An integral view is needed. Society, economy, behavior patterns of the people in various places, the way different people understand meaning of life, all of that is also part of development. Development is not just about the science, not just about the technology. It is about the people, the society, its makeup, its history, its way of finding meaning in life, the way people interact with each other, economy, all go hand in hand. Not just a technological paradigm to solve the environmental problem, and that too as if the environmental problem is distinct from development. No, they go hand in hand. And an integral solution is what is needed. What we are having is not two separate crises, one environmental and one social. All the social crises that I mentioned, loss of culture, loss of livelihood, loss of jobs, and the inhuman, undignified conditions of certain people, that social crisis and environmental crisis are not two separate crises. They are one and the same complex crisis, and they need to be handled together. The solution should simultaneously combat, as I said here, should simultaneously combat poverty, restore dignity to the excluded, and protect nature. A single method to provide all the three of them is needed, and that is not technology. That's not technology. And what we see is, even in the policies, and out of touch with reality. The poor are mentioned. The poor are the ones who are gravest affected by the environmental degradation. The poor nowadays are mentioned in political, economic discussions, in the global summits, and so on. The problems of the poor are mentioned, but who is mentioning them? The rich, the people who live a high quality of life and who have never experienced the real condition of the poor. They are the ones who sort of wax a few words of eloquence about the condition of the poor, but they don't really understand the problem. Poor are presented as an afterthought. And moreover, the rich refuse to face the problem. In fact, they blame population growth instead of the extreme and selective consumerism by some. In fact, the way some people consume, if the whole planet were to consume like that, the world will not sustain even for a minute. That's what we say. There is enough in the world for everyone's needs, but not enough even for one man's greed. One man's greed. And the way some minority people consume, if it is universalized, the planet would not even contain the waste products of such consumption. It will be destroyed in no time. In no time. You cannot universalize the way some rich people consume. So how can this be the right model of consumption? Where is justice in that model of consumption? The dominating paradigm, the technological paradigm, the problem with that is that it sees nature as an object, as something to be manipulated, as something formless and completely open to manipulation, as a given, as it said here, as a given, as an object of utility, as raw material to be hammered into useful shape. Cosmos is seen as a mere space into which objects can be thrown with complete indifference. That is the problem with the modern technocratic paradigm. In contrast, the old paradigm is this: receiving what nature itself allowed, as if from its own hand. Now, we attempt to extract everything possible from it, forgetting the reality. Forgetting the reality, not thinking about sustainability, replenishment, not thinking about the future. Receiving what nature allowed from its own hand was the old paradigm. For example, to go back to Gandhi's words, that machine itself is evil, Mahatma Gandhi's words. Now, how to understand that? Now, you don't, when you walk, you are a bit slow. So you want to hasten. So what they did is went to bullock cart. Don't think that I'm asking us to go back to bullock cart days. I'm just giving an example. Went to bullock cart, which is again something nature itself allows. And then from bullock cart going to horse to speed up further, which again nature itself allows. But then when you go into a motorized car, that is not what nature has allowed. It is we. It is we trying to extract beyond what nature can give. That is why Gandhi says machine itself is evil. And that's the rapidification. The old paradigm versus the new paradigm, the problem. Now, the technological products, moreover, are not neutral. They create a new culture. And we culture a social uh, uh, milieu. Just to give one example, nowadays it is impossible for anyone to conduct any function in their homes, in their families, without printing huge flex banners, many posters, and putting them up. I don't know if it is universal all through India. Definitely it is there in Tamil Nadu. In Chennai, very much prevalent. Flex posters have to be printed. If it's a birthday, it could be the first birthday, it could be anything. It could be to announce death. It could be the 16th day after death. It could be, let us say, age attaining functions. I'm sorry for saying anything offensive, but everything is just brought to the open with big flex banners being kept in important places, posters being printed, opulence being thrown out. And that has been engineered, forced down the throat of the poor people. Now they are in a situation where they cannot but do the same thing. A few vested interests, probably the ones who are printing the flex banners, created this style, this model in some artificial functions of their own houses, and then made everyone to follow suit. And as a result, many people go into debts. I know many people who have borrowed, they are already in debt, and they borrow so much money because they are having to celebrate some meaningless function actually. And they put even more debt upon their own heads. This is all engineered social evil, technology engineered social evil. So, technology decides the kind of society we live in and we build. And it is really inconceivable to promote a different culture. Now, these poor people will be really afraid of taking an alternate route. They'll be afraid that they'll be ostracized. They'll be considered as unfit for the society. So they will just follow suit, irrespective of the debt they fall into. And how will they live? Will they be happy? Will they be finding peace at all in their life? Will they be able to sleep in peace at night with all these problems? And technology, it never does anything for the profit or the well-being of the human race. Its one motive is power. Power and a lordship over all. Um, there is no freedom for alternate creativity. We are not allowed to think for ourselves and live our lives. What an impoverishment of human life, really. We all are endowed with our own individualities, our ability to think how to live our life. But now all of that is completely denied to human beings. And human life is impoverished in today's technological paradigm. And the vested interests, as I've already said, I hope you all are not one of those. There's the alliance between the economy and technology, and anything that is unrelated to their immediate interests, those are wiped out. And they prefer to just stick on to some superficial rhetoric and some sporadic acts of philanthropy through their corporate social responsibility and so on. Economy accepts every advance in technology only with a view to profit, without concern for its potential negative impact on human beings, arguing that the resultant global poverty will be resolved simply by market growth. That is not going to happen. Just when the market becomes flourishing, all the poverty will disappear. It is a myth. And no one looking for easy profit is interested in common good. They are only interested in money. We saw that greed during these pandemic times, of all the times during the pandemic times, starting from the medical profession down. The hospitals, many hospitals, the exorbitant amounts that they charged. I don't know if all hospitals did, but many hospitals did charge enormous amounts. I know one family, which was a middle class family, where there were 3 deaths, and the sole surviving male member of the church, that family, was given a bill of some 45 lakhs, a middle class family. He's not even earning that much money in 1 year. What absurdity in this pandemic time. And it is not only the hospitals, it came down to every level, up to the vegetable vendors. They also wanted to make the most. They thought that that was the time to make money. So, profit, if that is the motive, no one is interested in the common good. And so, you cannot expect the people, the businesses to be interested in the common good. They will only be interested in furthering their own money. And the present approach is a culture of relativism. Human beings place themselves at the center, uh, give absolute priority to their immediate convenience, and all else becomes relative. And that drives, when human beings place themselves at the center over all other living beings, they will not stop there. Then those human beings will take advantage of the less able human beings and treat them also as mere objects. That is how, for example, we have this buying of organs of the poor by the rich. How else can we justify this? And that is how we understand eliminating of children who are thought unwanted by the parents. It's all because of the relativism. When human beings place themselves as the most important among all the living beings, then it will not stop there. It will boil down to some human beings being better than the others, and thereby elimination of those less important human beings also. So the culture of relativism is an important feature of the present approach to solving the environmental problem. And the present approach is seeking quick solutions. Genetic modifications are part of nature. Evolution is part of nature. Mutations are part of nature. And domestication of animals, crossbreeding of species are all being done by humans also, by human intervention also. And the genetically modified crops also were developed by mimicking natural bacteria, the way they modify plant genomes. But nature is slow, we are fast. That is what I've already said. Now, the so-called broiler chicken that is made, they talk about Kentucky fried chicken and so on and so forth. Is it really chicken, or is it some mass of, uh, say, flesh, matter that we consume? Is it chicken that used to breed in the nature in the past, or is it just mass of flesh? Not even flesh, you can't even call it flesh. Some mass of matter that is being cultivated. The vegetables that we cultivate today with all the fertilizers, is it really a vegetable as it evolved in nature, or is it something, a mass of matter which looks like that vegetable? The reason this question is arising is because we try to eliminate all diversity in the species, but alternate diversity is emerging in diseases. So many diverse types of diseases. It is not even joke to say this. It's not even funny to say this. So many diverse diseases. Diversity being shifted from species to diseases. That is all the result of this artificiality. Also, you have to note that these artificial fertilizers are like these athletes using steroids. The athletes use steroids for the first few minutes so that they can win the race. We do the same thing to the lands when we put many of these artificial fertilizers. So the lands are depleted of their resources after some time. In fact, we have lands here for 2 years. I've just left them uncultivated here because in all the fertilizers, they have depleted the natural resources and so on, like steroids. And after that, there will be no energy left in whatever we cultivate from these lands. Very limited foresight. For example, birth control is seems to be the right solution to human problems. But then now we have an aging population, and with this aging population, how will we be able to sustain this earth? So human beings, our solutions have very limited foresight. And To make things worse, there's a dulling of the conscience. Ecological sensitivity hasn't eliminated our harmful consumption habits. For example, air conditioning. Air conditioning. We know that this is bad, but still the market is promoting air conditioning. We are also going and buying them. We have no pricking conscience. There is a dulling of the conscience over the years. Distractions, all these distractions dull our conscience of just how limited our world's resources are. And what will happen is, once all the resources are depleted, new wars will come. But they will be presented not as wars to gain access over resources, but under noble claims that they are going to save the deprived people, people facing injustice, and so on. A double speak, a hypocrisy. And even now, laboratories are developing new offensive weapons to hate these new wars that will come sooner or later. It will only be about resources, but they will present it under noble claims. Okay. So, but all the same, having said all that, there is still an emerging sign of hope, where people tend to adopt less polluting means of production, a non-consumerist model of consumption, and where technology is directed primarily to resolving people's concrete problems. There is a definite trend in that direction. At least many people are interested in this. More, less polluting means of production, non-consumerist models of life, and technology used to solve people's problems rather than as the sole means of development. Positive examples: cleaning up of rivers, native woodlands, creating beautiful landscapes, using less of fossil fuels, improving the transportation systems. All this is also happening. So there are signs of hope. It's almost like mist seeping gently beneath the closed doors. You're not able to see the mist coming in, but some of its effects, slowly it is seeping in beneath the closed door and we can feel it. So surely everything will be all right, provided we are able to also proactively support with these positive steps, step in with these positive steps. So what are some of the potential future approaches that we could have? This is the Earth Charter, the call given by the Earth Chapter. As never before in history, common destiny beckons us to seek a new beginning. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life, the firm resolve to achieve sustainability. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence, respect for life, the firm resolve to achieve sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and the joyful celebration of life. This is the call that the Earth Charter has given to us human beings, for our generation, for us to be remembered as the awakening of a new respect for life. Now, regaining past glory, when we say that, it is not about returning to the dark ages, but being more pragmatic and more right-paced in our development, to appropriate the positive and sustainable progress that has been made so far, but also to recover the values and the great goals which have been swept away. I just presented here one of the past glory. You should not think that it's only technology which has caused all these developments. It was a glorious time before technology came in. Should not deny that fact. And just as an example, every place would have had something like this, but I am presenting the ancient Tamil lands, the geography and the topography of these lands as presented in literature from 1,000 years old. So this technology that we are talking about is only 200 years old. But literature from 1,000 years old, uh, 5 types of topography was there in ancient Tamil lands called Aindinai, Marudam, Neidal, Mullai, Palai, Kurinji. 5 types of land. Forest lands, mountainous lands, farming lands, even 5,000 years ago, coastal lands and desert lands. All of them coexisted. Each of them had their own culture, their own way of finding meaning to life, their own joys and sorrows, and they were all interacting with each other. There was nothing wrong with that. In fact, during this period and even prior to that, many ancient temples have been built. 1,000 years old temples in Tamil Nadu. In some places in the north, even Orissa, and further north, in Maharashtra, we have these ancient temples, Jain temples, which are even older than that. Likewise, in the present day Kerala, at that time it was all one part of Tamil land. In present day Kerala, we have maybe even 1,700, 1,600 years old structures, churches, and so on. So all of them, they were able to have great progress. It is not as if technology is the one that brought progress, and removing technology would resort us to dark ages. Not at all. And nor are we advocating a removal of technology, but a more pragmatic use of technology and a slowing down of the pace of technology. But what is important is to remove this devious strategy of the vested interests. Now, that strategy is to tell young people to ignore their history. Now, when I talked about the history of different lands in India itself and their own cultures, and that they had developments, great structures they were able to put up and so on without any computers and without any JCPs and so on and so forth. Actually, the people would have been, some of the people might have been cynical, and that is because of the devious strategy that has been built into us to tell us to ignore the history, to make people to look down on their own past, When we're talking about Tamil lands and the topography, there might be a certain cynicism in some people. That is not their wrong. That has been inculcated deliberately into them to look down on their past and to look forward to the future that the vested interests themselves are trying to present. A resistance to the native ways, an embarrassment of anything native. Oh, that is how it is done. That is wrong. And a tendency to look down on one's own cultural identity. If they do that, if they inculcate that sort of ignorance of history and a hatred for anything about their own past, then it becomes easy to draw them into ways in which the vested interests would like them to go. And that is the goal. Now, why this monoculture? Now, if you go to some of the cities in India now, you'll not be able to differentiate whether you're in India or you are in the US. Now, why do we have to live like that? In our mannerisms, in our way of interactions, way of talking, everything. Why should that be the case? Don't we have our own culture? And isn't that richer? After all, the US culture is only 300, 400 years old. Why should we have to mimic them? At least European culture is older. But why do we have to mimic any of these other cultures? Don't we have our own culture? Entirely, we sometimes doubt whether we are in India or in a different land. And that is all part of the vested interests, their strategy to brainwash each and every one of us. And that should change. That should change. In that strategy, all the big words are emptied of meaning. Democracy, freedom, justice, unity, all of them are emptied of meaning. They become hollow, and they are bent and shaped to serve as tools for domination. And then new ideologies are spread. In fact, They only favor encounter between peoples who think alike. No diversity even in the thinking process. No exchange of ideas. Shielded from debate and facilitate spreading of fake news and false information, fomenting prejudice and hate. It's all an attempt to further their own end without realizing that in the process they themselves will also be destroyed. That has to be eradicated from the new strategy that we have. Then we need an all-round process. Scientific advances, technological abilities, and economic growth, surely. But not only that, but also moral and social progress. That is also needed. Without social and moral progress, science, technology, and economy will turn against humanity. These are some beautiful quotes I would like to read out to you. If one person lacks what is needed to live with dignity, it is because another is detaining it. Another has stolen what belongs to that person. And as a result, that person is having to put up with less dignity in his or her life. There is enough in this world for everyone's need, not enough for even one person's greed. Not to share our wealth with the poor is to rob them and take away their livelihood. Not to share our wealth, what we think is our wealth, with the poor is to rob them because it is their wealth. It's not our wealth. And thereby, by robbing them, we take away their livelihood. We are killing them. We are murderers also. Thieves and then murderers. The riches we possess are not our own, but those of the poor as well. The riches we possess are not our own, but those of the poor as well. When we provide the needy with their basic needs, we are giving them what belongs to them, not to us. They don't have to thank us. If you give a poor man who has not eaten for 2 days some food, we should not be expecting that person to thank us, because we are actually giving him what is actually his. We have to say sorry that we have held it from him for 2 days and left him to starve for 2 days. We have to say sorry rather than he say thanks. When we provide the needy with their basic needs, we are giving them what belongs to them, not to us. And then, importantly, as scientists, we need to go beyond our fascination, our interests, our quests for paper, patents, publication, and so on and so forth. It is not just that. There are broader implications. We think only in terms of our great interest in science, how fascinating it is. We want to do experiments. We want to study the science. But then, what are the implications of all of that we are studying? We have to understand the global impact of that. It's very important. It's not just about our fascination and interest. It's not about our quest for papers, to write more and more and more papers. I also was like that. I'm sorry to say, I'm not accusing you. I'm talking about generally the scientific community. I was also like that. Not everything doable is acceptable. Take the Nobel experience, as it were, as I put there. The Nobel experience. Nobel, when he invented the atomic bomb, the dynamite, he was only fascinated by the science. He said, I can do it, I can do it. And he did it. But that was not the right thing to do. Not everything doable is acceptable. He realized that. He may or may not have explicitly expressed his remorse, but he definitely felt that remorse. We should not be in that same situation still. Not everything doable is acceptable. We need to go beyond our papers and patents to know the impact, wider impact. And wider impact does not come just from technology, does not come just from the armchair people who sit in the comfort of their armchairs. So that means dialogue, being in touch with different aspects of the society and learning from them. That is very much having to inform science in order for science to be really doing what is acceptable. And we have to beware of being accomplices or puppets of the vested interests are being gullible in their face, being allowed to be cheated by them. We have to be very careful about those things. Interdependence should be acknowledged. Interdependence of all living beings. No living being is self-sufficient. Every living being, including human beings, exists in dependence with each other. We are dependent on each other in order to complete each other and in the service of each other. And however, we should not put human beings on the same level as all living beings either. Should not put human beings on the same level as all human beings. That is one danger. In fact, some places you wonder if some people put human beings below some other living beings. They will go to protect species, but they will kill human beings or not come to the defense of human beings and their dignity. That is not the right approach. Human beings have a unique place and a tremendous responsibility. So you should not put human beings on the same plank as all other living beings, but nor are they to exploit any other living being either. Exploit at the expense of the breaking of the food chains, the cycles that have been naturally established. Else, even treating human beings as not as important as other living beings or on par with other living beings will create new imbalances. And in fact, one cannot claim to hear the cry of nature without acknowledging the cry of the vulnerable human being, without acknowledging the worth of the poor person, the human embryo, and persons with disabilities, elderly people who are not able to work anymore, without acknowledging the worth of all these people, without respecting all these people, without respecting the poor person, without respecting the human embryo in the womb, without respecting the elderly who have become fragile and unable to work, we will not be able to claim to respect the cry of nature and come to its aid. And considering, some people consider themselves more worthy than others. That is another problem to be avoided. We may have varieties, no uniformity, but equality. No uniformity, definitely. There should be diversity, but equality. Equality in diversity is the way of the cosmos, the way of nature, the way among human beings also. Now, we need a wider vision and thought. Sustainable use should also consider the regenerative abilities of the different species, different aspects. Allow time for regeneration, natural regeneration. And as I said, incorporate the history, the culture, the architecture of each place, thus preserving its original identity, the identity of the people, to prevent the particular identity from not being lost. Not everyone to look like they are from the US, from the USA. That's not how it is. You have to preserve the original identity. Because I'm not opposed to the US because I studied the US, but I'm opposed to the monoculture that it is not the US that is creating it, some vested interests who are creating that. And then an integral ecology is also inseparable from the notion of common good. We incorporate history, culture, architecture of the place, the original identity, and also consider the common good of everyone. Common good means everyone has access, ready access to what is needed to preserve their dignity. That's common good. In fact, it's very important to talk about again Gandhiji's talisman. It's called Gandhi's talisman. He says, if you want to make a change, the society, a development, a technological development that you want to bring to the fore, he says, bring to your mind the face of the poorest man you have seen. Poorest man you have seen. And then ask yourself this question: how is this one going to help that man? And if you are not sure it's going to help that man, don't do it. This is something which scientists can follow very easily. I'm sure you've seen poor people. Among them, consider the poorest. Keep him in your mind all the time. And before you develop anything, ask this question. How is this particular paper that I'm writing? How is this particular concept that I'm trying to develop, this particular experiment that I'm doing, going to be of benefit to that particular man? And if you think it is not going to be of use to him, it is going to be his detriment, definitely don't do it. Don't do it. Because common good in present scenario of injustice boils down to what is called the preferential option for the poorest. Preferential option for the poorest. What Gandhiji says in his Gandhi's talisman is what this statement is all about. Common good boils down to option for the poor, keeping the face of the poorest man in front of our eyes and doing only what is going to be of benefit to that man. And in doing that, intergenerational solidarity. Intragenerational solidarity with all the people, all the living beings, preferential option for the poor, but also intergenerational solidarity. We got the world as a gift and we got it freely. We have to leave it freely and untainted for the next generation. So intergenerational solidarity is also very important to consider. So all of this regenerative capacity of the different aspects of the ecosystem, the history, the culture, the architecture, the common good boiling down to option for the poorest, the most vulnerable, and intergenerational solidarity. All of this considered together, that is what will give us the solution that we should use in order to heal the environment of all the hurt that is caused by our disrespect to it. Stricter measures are required more practically. Some practical points. Stricter measures are required to reduce the pollution, which you all are very much seized with, substituting for fossil fuels and developing alternative renewable source of energy. And some countries are now establishing sanctuaries in land and in ocean where human intervention is completely prohibited. And in that, we actually have to pay critical attention to areas which are rich in number of species and endemic species, rare and less protected species. Now for example, we have to take advantage of solar energy, but then countries like India or even poorer countries need to be given access to technology by the richer ones. They have the obligation to provide easy access to technology at probably no cost, and technical assistance and financial help also to be able to set up those sort of things. That is the way to go for the world. Way to go for the world. And we also have to try and understand the ecosystem, the function of the ecosystem, analyze the different variables that will be affected by any significant modification of the environment. That is very important. It is very difficult, as I said in that example also about the emulsion polymerization reactor. After all, one reactor, one distillation column, or one engine, to model that in its entirety would be such a difficult task. If you develop that model, then you can tweak with various variables and see what will affect what. But then developing that model is an impossibility when it comes to the ecosystem. We have to put our effort in that direction. At least now it's an impossibility. But we have to put our help and effort in that direction so that our work is contributing towards an integral development of the world. And eliminating social exclusion. It's like two negatives becoming a positive. Eliminating social exclusion. Now, why would someone be disadvantaged just because they are not naturally endowed with an ability to sit and study in the classroom, or they come from an economically poorer background, or they come from certain areas? Why should they be disadvantaged? But then our present system really does that. Now, I come from a middle class family, but I was able to grow up purely because, grow up in the social ladder as it were, purely because I was endowed, gifted in studies. But then there will be others also who are again equally from the same economical background, but they're not very good in studies. Why should they be disadvantaged? Why should they be disadvantaged? There's absolutely no justice at all in that. Some people receive a fine education, grow up well nourished, or naturally possess great talents, and they don't need a protective state. They don't need a proactive protective state. But the same rule does not apply to a disabled person, to someone born in dire poverty, to those lacking a good education and with little access to adequate health care. The society needs to do something to take care of them. Now, this question of intellectual property, you're filing for patents and so on. I think it is a joke. Intellectual property. Because, for example, you take the case of applying for intellectual property on traditional products. Whose is the intellectual property of? Is it ours? Is it the particular person's? Whose is intellectual property of? So it doesn't make sense. That sort of social exclusion should be eliminated. Should be eliminated. Everyone should have the privileges, and those disadvantaged should have more privileges. More privileges. And tougher measures are needed. For example, they talk about carbon credits and renewable energy certificates and so on and so forth. That is just buying time. That's just a ploy played by some rich countries, actually. We have to be able to see through those sort of things. Humanity has to see through most of those things. And also, we have to reject the market notion that profits of the companies and individuals will solve all the problems. It will not solve any of the problems. And if you raise these questions, if I raise all these questions, for example, I may be considered as standing in the way of progress, or as a person who's outdated, going back to dark ages, as I said. That is because of the conditioning that has been created by the vested interests. That is the consumeristic paradigm. They have made us blind. They make us think that we are free as long as we are able to buy. They make us think that we are free as long as we are able to buy the latest gadgets, the latest of whatever we need. But actually, it is not we who are free, who are buying. We are not the ones who are free. It's the ones who are selling, those who are wielding the economic and financial power, who are free. They are the only ones who are free. The consumerist paradigm has made all of us slaves, slaves of our desire. We play to their tune. So we need to have tougher measures upon these sort of things. And education and training is very, very important. This is the last bit of slides that I have. Education and training. Contemporary man has not been trained to use power well. No commensurate development in human values and conscience. That's why I'm actually very happy to see that in this purely technical faculty development program, you have one session on values. It's a very good change, definitely, because that's not been the case so far. No commensurate, comparable development in human responsibility and values and conscience. Only scientific development, technological development. Thankfully, environmental education has slightly have broadened its goal now, surely. In the beginning, it was about information, consciousness raising. Environmental education was about consciousness raising and the prevention of environmental risks. It tends now to include a critique of this myth of modernity, the myth of the utilitarian mindset, myth of consumerism, and so on, that they are all going to lead to the good. The myth that these all are going to lead to the good. We have a critique of that also being discussed under environmental education. It seeks also to restore the level of ecological equilibrium, equilibrium within ourselves, with others, with other living beings, nature, and if you believe in a higher power, with the higher power also, with God also. That is all happening in environmental education, thankfully. But all the same, the education has not succeeded in building, instilling good habits into our being. It's not instilled into our hearts, actually. But that has to happen. The training, habituation of these good habits to avoid use of plastics and papers. I have struggled to avoid the use of single-use plastics here in my place. I took out many rallies, as it were, where I went around with people to pick up the plastics from the roads and the bushes and so on and so forth. And many people stood by to see, but does not really stop them from throwing them away, nor from acquiring all those single-use plastic bags, those black color bags, or those white transparent plastic bags, and all the Coca-Cola and other types of bottles and so on and so forth thrown away. Consuming them in the first place to be avoided. In fact, the shops are not supposed to be giving them, but they are still giving out. But why can't we take a bag and go? I've been trying to conscientize the people to take a bag and go with them. But then the culture, the consumerist culture that has been inculcated into them, we have to work against that one and inculcate this value into the people. Reducing water consumption, separating the refuse, biodegradable and non-degradable refuse, cooking only what can be reasonably consumed, showing care for the other living beings, using public transport and carpooling, planting trees, even if it is monocultures, planting them, turning off unnecessary lights, and so on. These habits need to be instilled through education. Especially, we need to build the conscience. That's very, very important. We need educators who are capable of incorporating these ethics into the people, helping people to grow in solidarity. A bottom-up approach, that is what is needed, a bottom-up approach, where every person assesses the impact of every action that he does on the world. Every person assesses the impact of every action he does on the world. If we can overcome that individualism, we will truly be able to develop a new lifestyle. If everyone becomes like that, conscientious, from a bottom-up approach, the system will become better. For example, those who enjoy a surplus of water yet choose to conserve it. A person who can afford more but regularly uses less. A person can afford an air conditioner, but he chooses to not use one. A person can afford to pay high electricity bill, but still chooses to switch off the lights. A person who can afford rich food, but still chooses modest food. A person who can afford expensive clothes, and so on. That makes them attain a high moral stature. And that allows them to look beyond themselves and the group to which they belong. It helps them to think more broadly. Mere existence of laws and regulations is not sufficient in the long run. Even when effective means of enforcement are present, they are not sufficient. We'll find ways to circumvent the laws and regulations. Rather, a personal transformation. A personal transformation is very important. Very important. And that will lead to a transformed society. Transforms. This is my last slide, actually. Transformed society, finding satisfaction in a little, not in big amounts. The constant flood of new consumer goods really does not allow us to live. Does not allow, one mobile is there, we buy it, but even before we can enjoy that, something else is there and we want to throw what we just bought without having lived our life with that to something new. We don't live. The new the consumerist model only makes us confused. It doesn't enable us to live, to cherish little things. Rather, living on little, one really lives. Living on little, one really lives. Then one also cultivates other pleasures, of course, friendship, service, developing one's gifts, music and art, contact with nature, prayer, if you believe in a higher entity. All of those things helps us to live. Now we've in fact lost sight of the purpose of human activity itself. We do activity for activity's sake, especially scientists and so on. We do activity for activity's sake almost, like the Nobel's experience. And we should not think, oh, how is all this little thing that I do going to make a change? It does make a change. Goodness spreads, goodness spreads, and such actions restore our self-esteem also. Now, last bullet, we say that in the evolution of world, survival of the fittest was the underlying paradigm. Survival of the fittest. Well, survival of the fittest could have been the paradigm that was basis until the evolution of human consciousness. Now, in our evolution, development is evolution. In our evolution, survival of the fittest cannot be the underlying paradigm. Cannot be the underlying paradigm. Rather, we need to take responsibility for the unfit. We need to take responsibility for the vulnerable. Not survival of the fittest, but preferential option towards the poor. Gandhi's talisman. That is what we need as human family in order to truly respect the other including fellow human beings, all living beings, the earth, the cosmos as a whole. So with those words, I will stop here. And this is really the major source of all that I presented, written by Pope Francis, who is the head of the Catholic Church, an encyclical letter, a book called Laudato Si, on the care of our common home. Laudato Si means we praise you, Lord. So that was the major source, but I also referred to other sources, including Heinz Swaraj of Mahatma Gandhi and other few small sources. I hope this was of some use to you. Um, Even the questions that I give will be open-ended because, as I said in the beginning, if I said all this in person, face to face, you may have thrown some missiles at me during the course of the lecture itself because you don't agree. But I asked you to just listen me through, hear me through, and then judge for yourself whether this is true or it's exaggeration or it's false analysis and so on, and come to a conclusion for yourself. That is real teaching, a teaching method for you also to follow with your students, not to force your ideas down their throat, as it were, but to present the facts and enable them to decide. Also, not to judge anyone. I'm talking about values, not to judge anyone. We can present facts and help them to judge themselves. Not say you are in the wrong, but present facts and say, could you be in the wrong? Ask them, could you be in the wrong? Or are you right? And if they decide that they are in the right, they are right. They are the ones who know better. Okay, so in that way, I've presented things to you, and I'm asking you, could you be in the wrong? Could you be in the wrong? And of course, I have this great people who have been the basis for all my presentations. Nothing is original. Nothing is original. And I, on their behalf, ask you this question. Could this be the case? Could you be in the wrong? Could we be in the wrong? Scientists and environmentalists and so on, could we be in the wrong? And if yes, we need to try to change ourselves. So with that, I stop here. I don't know if you want to ask any questions. Thank you.
Participants, are you having any questions? No questions? I
Was
guess.
it understandable?
Pardon?
Audio,
Yeah,
audio was.
here and there we had a little hitch with the audio, but it was okay because
Okay.
we could see the slide. It was okay. So participants, anybody has, okay, I've muted them, so maybe I have to uh, unmute them. So participants, anybody has questions?
I can also send the slides.
Yeah, you have to send me the slides, so I have to upload
Okay.
it in the website, so I can share the slides also with the participants. So
Okay.
if there are no questions, and I know all of you must be hungry, wanting to go for lunch, the
Sure.
next session starts at 2:30, and it is by Dr. Muthukumar from NIT Trichy. So I hope you will be back in time and we can have another fruitful session on what he is going to talk. So thank you very much, Father. So
Thank
um, we'll I will we can leave now the faculty. We will